Welcome to Salem Witch Trials Daily. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
I'm Sarah Jack. North of Salem Village was a town that was actually hit the hardest by the witch hunt of 1692. Accused witches Samuel Wardwell and Martha Carrier's community, Andover.
While Salem gets the name recognition, Andover actually saw the highest number of accusations. About 45 individuals were accused there. And for a long time, historians tried to explain this massive outbreak by looking at the town's leadership, specifically its two ministers.
Okay. Considering Salem Village was embroiled in disputes over its one minister, in Andover, there were two ministers sharing a pulpit. What did that mean?
We're looking at the relationships between the senior minister, Francis Dane, who was Martha Carrier's uncle, and the junior minister, Thomas Barnard, and their shared congregation.
Francis Dane was the long-serving minister, but he was an older gentleman with health issues.
He was no longer performing his full duties, so the town brought in a younger man, Thomas Barnard, to take over some of the workload. But here's the rub. The town was paying both men.
And in colonial New England, nothing stirred up resentment quite like the ministry taxes. Paying two salaries was a financial strain, leading to tensions within the community. Historically, it has been tempting to look at this and say, aha, there must have been a faction loyal to the old Dane and a faction loyal to the young Bernard, and they used witchcraft accusations to attack each other.
That's not the case. Andover seemed ripe for this kind of analysis. The town was semi-formally divided into a north end and a south end. So the expectation might be that there could be a geographical split. Perhaps the north end accusing the south end or vice versa, based on which minister they liked best. However, we've spoken extensively with historian Richard Hite, who wrote the book on Andover's witch hunt. He crunched the numbers, and what he found completely dismantles this minister controversy theory.
Richard looked at the 45 accused people in Andover. If this were a sectional conflict, he said we'd see lopsided numbers, but instead, there were 24 accused from the north end and 21 from the south end.
It's practically an even split. And when you look at the accusers, the people filing the complaints or testifying, there were 12 from the north end and 11 from the south end.
It's almost statistically perfect. There was no geographical divide. The accusations were flying in every direction, regardless of where people lived or which minister they might have preferred.
And that brings us to the reputations of the ministers themselves. Francis Dane is well known as a hero of 1692. He was an opponent of the witch hunt from the beginning and signed petitions for the accused and spoke out against the witch trials.
In some of the situations, it appeared that Thomas Barnard might have been leading the charge.
This reputation largely comes from a specific incident involving a touch test. We know that a touch test was performed in the Andover meeting house. This was where blindfolded afflicted persons were touched by suspects to see if their fits would cease.
The record states that this test was done after Reverend Barnard had been at prayer. Because he was leading a prayer right before the spoke magic experiment, people assumed he orchestrated it.
But Richard Hite argues that this is a misunderstanding of the minister's role. A decision to hold a test like that, essentially a mass screening of the population, would have been made by the town selectman or magistrate, not the minister.
Reverend Barnard was at the meeting house praying because he was the minister. That was his job. If the town authorities asked him to lead a prayer before a civic gathering, they even did this before executions of all sorts, he would do it, regardless of what he thought of the proceedings.
And one big piece of evidence against the idea that Barnard was a witch hunter is his signature. Just like Francis Dane, Thomas Barnard signed petitions defending the suspects.
So why was Andover hit so hard with witchcraft accusations?
This brings us back to the family of Francis Dane. Even though the town wasn't split, the accusers seemingly targeted the senior minister's family with surgical precision.
It's staggering. We know that 28 members of Francis Dane's extended family were accused of witchcraft. This includes his daughters, Abigail Faulkner and Elizabeth Johnson Sr., and his granddaughters, Elizabeth Johnson Jr. and Dorothy Faulkner.
This suggests that while there may not have been a Barnard faction accusing a Dane faction, there may have been some people who had a reason for accusing the family of Francis Dane.
Francis Dane's relationship to Martha Carrier, his niece, may better explain why so many of his relatives were accused. After all, many of his relatives were her relatives. She was the first person from Andover to be accused of witchcraft, and she was alleged to be the Queen of Hell, a ringleader and a recruiter of other witches.
And unlike Salem Village, where Samuel Parris was actively testifying against his own parishioners and fanning the flames, the Andover ministers, both of them, appear to have been trying to put the fire out.
It really changes how we should view Andover. It wasn't a civil war between two pastors. It was a community that got pulled into the Salem witch hunt.
And it reminds us to be careful with historical narratives. It's easy to say the young minister versus the old minister, but the records show them standing together on petitions trying to save the lives of their own flock.
We have a great episode with Richard Hite called Richard Hite on the Andover Witch Hunt. Listen to that.
Read his book, In the Shadow of Salem, The Andover Witch Hunt of 1692.